It's December 2024 and I'm in a German city that once rivaled Cologne for importance in the Hanseatic League, and today for the number of Christmas markets. The cultural centre of Westphalia, the modern city of Münster, is located on the Aar River, a tributary of the Ems, about 55 kilometres west of the Dutch border and just north of the Rhine-Ruhr region, the largest metropolitan region in Germany. The history of the city is best captured in the Stadtmuseum, housed, in part, in a former department store in the heart of the Old Town. There are traces of Stone Age hunter-gatherers, such as flint tools and arrowheads, but no sign of settlement in the area at this time has yet been discovered. The first indications of people settling in the area don't appear until the Bronze Age, from when the area was continually settled through to the arrival of the Romans. The Horstberg, the highest point in the surrounding area, and which today houses the cathedral and Domplatz, has traces of Germanic settlement from the Roman imperial period, but these were likely abandoned around 300 AD. The real history of the city itself only goes back to 793 and Charlemagne sending out a missionary, Ludger, to convert the Saxons to Christianity. He established a church and cloister on the right bank of the Aar at a previous Frankish stronghold of Nijmegen, literally the ford over the Aar River. In 805, Ludger was ordained as the first bishop of the city. With an increasing number of churches being built in the area around the cathedral, including what are today the Lamberti and the Oberwasserkirche, the city's name changed first to monasterium before eventually morphing into Münster by the start of the 13th century. This was also the century that the city walls were constructed, with the churches and market settlements that now made up Münster being enclosed by 1278 by a wall that was 8 to 10 metres high, over 4 kilometres long and protected in the front by a moat. Along the line of the wall were 6 towers and 10 gates. In the middle part of the century, the city joined the then-growing Hanseatic League, and in 1494 was given the status of suburb of the Hanseatic League in Westphalia, making it the most important Hanseatic city in the region, helped by Cologne being excluded from the League. The city was caught up in the turbulence of the Reformation, and starting in 1532, a forceful attempt to establish an Anabaptist theocracy was made in Münster, culminating in the Anabaptists seizing control of the city in 1534. The ousted bishop then besieged the city, a situation that lasted until 1535, when the city was finally retaken by the besiegers. 3 of the main rebels were tortured and executed in the marketplace before their bodies were exhibited in cages hung from the steeple of St Lambert's Church as a warning to others. Münster played an important part in the 30 Years' War, being besieged but not taken twice by the Hessians, and being the site where the Peace of Westphalia was signed in 1648, concluding the war and, at least for a while, settling many of the outstanding European issues of the time. Not long after that, the city wall was demolished, though the line of the wall was retained and exists today as the modern Promenade. In the middle of the 18th century, the Prince bishops, who were still in charge of the city, built themselves a new palace, which was constructed over 20 years from 1767 to 1787. The original building was destroyed during the bombing raids of World War II, with a reconstructed palace being completed in 1954, at the same time it became the official seat of the University of Münster. At the start of the 19th century, the city was taken by the Prussians, but was soon after taken by Napoleon's French troops, who held the city from 1806 until the Congress of Vienna, after Napoleon's defeat, handed the city back to Prussia. At the same time, Westphalia was officially re-established and incorporated into the country as a new province, with Münster becoming its capital. The city is still home to the constitutional and administrative courts of the modern Bundesländer of Nordrhein-Westfalen. The city suffered repeated bombing raids during the Second World War, which in total destroyed around 91% of the old town. War came to an end with British and American troops entering the town on the evening of Easter Monday, April 2nd, 1945, to find a deserted pile of rubble where the city had once been. Westphalia found itself in the British zone of occupation following the end of the war, and clearance of rubble of the ruins in the city took several years, with over 1 million cubic metres having been cleared by December 1949. Reconstruction of the city continued through the 1950s and 1960s. Built during the 13th century and demolished in the 17th, the former walls of the city today form the Promenade, a cycle and walking route that encloses the old city and forms a green ring around it. Dotted along the promenade are reminders of its past, with two of the old city towers still standing. The Zwinger occupies the site of the earlier northeast tower of the city walls, being built as a bulwark to the wall in the early to mid-1520s. During the Anabaptist Revolution, the revolutionaries took early control of the Zwinger and used it to defend themselves against the bishop. After the revolution, the bishop had the Zwinger converted into a stronghold so it could suppress any further trouble in the city. Over the following years, the tower had a number of uses, including as a horse mill for grinding gunpowder and as a prison, a role it continued to play up until the latter part of the 19th century. After the First World War, the Zwinger was converted into a living space and studio before becoming the local base for the Hitler Youth, and in 1944 reverting to its former role as a prison, though this time under the control of the brutal Gestapo, with the torture and execution of forced labourers and prisoners of war taking place on site. Since 1989, the site has been used as a memorial to the victims of violence in Münster, with restoration works taking place in the late 1990s. Today it houses artworks and is open to the public during the summer months. Predating the construction of the city walls, the Buddenturm was first built around 1150 as a defensive tower. Much like the Zwinger, it's also spent time as a prison and a powder tower for storing gunpowder. When the city's fortifications were demolished, the tower was retained in part because it was still being used as a powder tower. In 1879, the city purchased the tower from the military, raised it by 20 metres and dismantled the stair tower in order to convert the tower into a water tower, with a 500 cubic metre water tank installed and the tiled roof added, replacing the crenellated crown. After the damage caused to it during the Second World War, the tower was restored, albeit 10 metres shorter than it had been, and converted to be used as general storage facility and a control point for the city's street lighting system, a role it kept until 1992, when the tower was handed back to the city by the utilities company. Then leader of Münster, Prince Bishop Christoph Bernhard von Galen, had a citadel built on the western side of the city walls between 1661 and 1662, in part to protect against external enemies, but also to protect the Prince Bishop from the city's population. The buildings of the citadel barely survived 100 years before they were demolished in 1764 as part of the clearance of the city's fortifications, though in this case it was also to make way for a new palace of the Prince Bishops, the Schloss Münster, allowing the Prince Bishop to relocate from the former residence on the Domplatz. The palace is designed in the high Baroque style, something which had already gone out of fashion in much of the rest of Europe by the time construction started. Following the destruction of World War II, the palace was rebuilt and became the home of the city's university. Behind the palace and in the still identifiable bastions of the old citadel is the university's botanical gardens. Originally established in 1803, the gardens were created as a teaching and research facility, with the first greenhouses opening the following year. Today, the garden contains around 8,000 species in both external beds and in the 10 greenhouses, most of which are open to the public free of charge year-round, even in the pouring rain. Slightly further round on the promenade, in the space between the palace and the Aasee, or Aar Lake, at the southern point of the former fortifications, is the old site of the city's zoo. Originally founded in 1871 as the Westphalian Association for Bird Protection, Poultry and Songbird Breeding, the first part of the Westphalian Zoological Garden was opened just 4 years later. Over the following years, a number of different animal houses were constructed, housing many different species of animals from primates and elephants to bears and big cats. By the late 1960s, it was recognised that the site wasn't suitable for animals, and works began on a new zoo at the opposite end of the Aasee, with the old zoo closing its doors for the final time on New Year's Eve 1973. The 1950s built Owl Tower, or Eulenturm, was preserved as a monument to the history of the site. With the zoo moving out, the land was offered by the city to the Westdeutsche Landesbank in an attempt to keep the company in the city when it was looking for new building. The move kept the bank's headquarters here until 2009, with the bank itself only limping on until 2012 when it was split up, mostly due to the effects of the 2008 financial crisis and its role in it. The southern flank of the promenade runs along the banks of the Aasee, or Aar Lake. This man-made reservoir was created in parts to ensure the city's drinking water supply and protect the city from flooding. Work started in 1914, but almost immediately halted due to the outbreak of World War I. Works only recommenced following a severe flood in 1925, with the lake finally completed in 1934. Turning in from the former fortifications towards the old city centre and to the highest point of the town, you reach the Domplatz and the Cathedral Church of St Paul's. This is the third cathedral to stand on the site, with the first, the so-called Ludgerus Cathedral, standing just north of the existing building between 805 and 1377. A second cathedral was built in the 10th or 11th century, was demolished within a couple of hundred years to make way for the current building, which, for a European cathedral, was constructed at exceptional speed in just 39 years between 1225 and 1264, albeit with the new cathedral taking advantage of retaining the western end and twin towers of that second cathedral. In April 1377, the bishop confirmed that the two cathedrals, that first Ludgerus Cathedral and the new third cathedral, were blocking each other's light, and he authorised the demolition of the original cathedral. During the rule of the Anabaptists, the cathedral was attacked and damaged during the iconoclasm. Numerous pictures and statues were destroyed, along with reliquaries, crosses, and the original astronomical clock. Following the damage of the Anabaptists, advantage was taken to remodel the inside of the cathedral and chapter house. New sculptures were added to replace the ones that had been destroyed, and between 1540 and 1542 a new astronomical clock was constructed and installed, which is still in use today. The building was damaged multiple times in the bombing raids of the Second World War, but the worst damage was caused on the 10th of October 1943 when a devastating air raid on the city caused the vaults and walls to collapse. The cathedral was rebuilt between 1946 and 1956, mostly to the original design. The only exception was the west portal, which had been destroyed beyond repair and was replaced with a simple sandstone wall punctured by 4 small round windows enclosed by 12 circular round windows. The design is said to be reminiscent of the original Romanesque westwork, though not always looked upon fondly by locals. A short distance away is the St Lamberti church. The current church was built between 1375 and 1450, taking far longer than the cathedral. It's most famous of the cages that hang from the spire. It was into these cages that the bodies of the executed leaders of the Anabaptist rebellion were placed, and remained for 50 years as a warning to other would-be rebels. The cages were returned to their position following the demolition and reconstruction of the spire in the 19th century. On the 18th of November 1944, a direct hit from an RAF bomb on the church sent the highest cage crashing to the ground, and one of the 2 lower cages to fall into the organ loft. The third cage was left dangling from the spire. The church was repaired in 1948, with the 3 cages returned to their original positions. During Advent, the area around St Lamberti, along with several other points across the city, is home to the many different Weihnachtsmarkt or Christmas markets of the city, with Münster boasting 6 different markets and around 320 stalls dotted across the old town. Münster Hauptbahnhof sits on the railway line from Berlin, Hanover and Osnabrück to Essen, Duisburg, Düsseldorf and Cologne, with direct trains to Düsseldorf Airport. The airport is the 4th busiest in Germany behind Frankfurt, Munich and Berlin, and has connections across much of Europe, the Middle East and North Africa. The smaller Münster-Osnabrück airport, located 25 kilometres north of Münster and linked only by a shuttle bus from Münster Hauptbahnhof, has limited year-round service to Munich, Alicante and Mallorca, along with seasonal connections to popular German holiday resorts in Egypt, Greece and Spain.